Right. Welcome to the microdose of Orange Pill podcast right here. We're microdosing the IMF crying harder. They're crying harder. I should have loaded some crying effects. Right. So let's look at some of the stuff that the IMF has said. El Salvador adopting Bitcoin is an inadvisable shortcut. International Monetary Fund. What happened? Alongside a blog post published on Sunday, the IMF tweeted that the risk of, quote, privately issued crypto assets like Bitcoin makes it so that making them equivalent to a national currency is an inadvisable shortcut, they say. The bizarre thing, Max, is that the blog post then goes on to admit, this is what they say, the IMF admits that digital assets, quote, have the potential to provide cheaper and faster payments, enhance financial inclusion, improve resilience and competition among payment providers, and facilitate cross-border transfers.
Yeah, and they also made a comment like they can't stop it.
Yes, they said they can't stop it. They talked about how Bitcoin is volatile, blah, blah, blah. And yet Bitcoin lives on. All the list of stuff they say, all the FUD they pushed, they said, and yet Bitcoin lives on, which is like that will be on the tombstone of the fiat system, right? And yet Bitcoin lives on.
Right. So the IMF is capitulating, right? So as we predicted they would, because the wall of encryption that protects the Bitcoin network is impenetrable. Nobody can stop it. No government, no NGO, no central bank, no group of governments, no force on Earth can stop it, and probably no force in the galaxy or in the universe can stop it. So the IMF is coming to that realization, as are other groups and banks and countries. And the unstoppable vector that Bitcoin is on, it's tearing a new path. A new path is being forged. One of the things that they said there, and I saw somebody on Twitter making a comment about it, which is interesting, is they refer to Bitcoin as privately issued. And that's an interesting idea in that, Bitcoin is not private like a private corporation is private, or other definitions of private. It is an open source project, and it's public. It's the public domain. It's a publicly issued currency by and for the public. So that nomenclature there is not quite accurate, but it's great to see the IMF fold. I think Christine Lagarde runs the IMF these days.
Well, Christine Lagarde once did. She's been at the ECB for the past 2 or 3 years. Every time maybe because you're never up on stage at the same time that Christine Lagarde is, but she's attended a few of our No Fucks Given tours. So she is up on stage often, and she is the head of the ECB.
Yeah. That's right. She's over at the ECB. But she may. So the ECB can't do anything about it. ECB's got huge problems. ECB is flirting with the idea that they need to raise interest rates. And they're going to have to come to the realization that that's all equally impossible. So there you have it, my sweet pea, little pea of my sweet over that's there, right. Queen Stacy P, Queen P.
We are live. I'm just checking our Twitter stream over at Orange Pill Pod. So if you go to Twitter, Orange Pill Pod, that is us. And maybe Max will also go over there right now, live on air, and he'll retweet it. That we're tweeting from Orange Pill Pod that we're live
where
right
do I
here.
Go? Where do I go?
If you go to Twitter and you look up Orange Pill, you'll get to Orange Pill Pod. And that's our Twitter handle, Max. And then you go there from your Max Kaiser account and you retweet that.
All right, I have to relog in because, my phone connections don't work much these days.
Oh, we need to cry harder here at the Orange Pill Podcast.
I need to reload this whole thing.
The institution of the IMF admits that many cryptos are secure, easy to access, and cheap to transact, but claims that in most cases, risks and costs outweigh potential benefits. They don't go into these alleged risks and costs. For instance, that is too volatile and unrelated to the real economy. So the real economy, they believe, is the fictional economy of their fiats, whereby everybody can get Biden bucks. Money printing can continue forever. Money printer goes brr forever. And that is the economy which will, on their tombstone of that fiat economy, you'll see, and yet Bitcoin lives on.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting to see these major institutions collapse. But all institutions are collapsing from the fiat world, right? That's why the Afghanistan exit was such a catastrophe and so sloppy, because they don't have the institutional ability to do anything well. It's all one big mess. It's just crazy fiat, crazy people. So they're all collapsing.
It's not just fiat crazy people. The fact is, what happens with fiat is a high time preference. So they have no regard for any of their actions because they don't care about consequences beyond this microsecond right now that they're living in. So they don't care about that. They just care about consuming and consuming and consuming all that they possibly can get their hands on. So that's why you see what appears to be just lethargy and chaos, is that we're at that future that we started consuming 40 years ago, 50 years ago, at the beginning of this all fiat world of August 15th, 1971. What you're seeing is the result of the higher and higher time preference the entire way to this end point.
We're at the end for sure. I mean, that's without a question of a doubt, thanks to Bitcoin. The question is, did Bitcoin cause the problem, or is Bitcoin the result of this problem? You can make a case either way, that Bitcoin kind of caused the problem, because it does cause Bitcoin derangement syndrome. It does cause people to go insane. We've seen some people go literally insane, like John McAfee, for example, went insane. And other people in the space, in the so-called altcoin space, have gone insane, essentially. In the institutional space, the IMF, World Bank, Paul Krugman, right? All these economists have gone insane. Nouriel Roubini has gone insane. So it can cause people to go insane. So I have to ask that question, is it a reaction? Is it the 2008 crisis and it's a reaction? Is the cypherpunk movement a reaction? Or are they causing all this to collapse? I think, I've often weighed in more on the side that they're causing this whole thing to collapse. And which is what we needed, because there's no way to reform the current system. You can't reform the IMF. You can't reform the central banks. You can't reform the Wall Street banks. They have to be essentially destroyed. And this is a weapon called Bitcoin that is a peaceful weapon that defunds all the institutions, because, like a black hole, it just defunds them. And so that's what we need. I mean, so the environment's going to get really, really choppy, but that's the reality that we're living in.
I think Bitcoin is a revelation rather than, say, a reaction. I think it's just revealed all of that was there. And I think the human mind and any society or culture or community is made up of a bunch of human minds. They construct ways to make sense of it. And whether it's cable news, whether it's community events, whether it's church, they create ways to try to make sense of what they're witnessing and experiencing in every day. And you could see that by looking back into the past, and you could see how humans in a collective, in a group, in a community, try to always make sense of what they saw in the skies through things like, gods, the many gods, and all sorts of explanations, random explanations, perhaps, for events like the Black Plague, when, the head of the Catholic Church, the Vatican, said at the time that it was like, there was something in the air that it was causing this. So I think we try to explain what we're seeing, and then Bitcoin comes along and it just shatters all the constructs that we've created in order to explain and justify the world around us, especially this fiat world.
Yeah. Again, that happens periodically throughout history. All the models get broken.
Yes.
Right. And so the attempt, as you're talking about there, is the attempt to create economies of scale for humans who want to live together. And they realize that there's no point in repeating things ad nauseum, that there you can create a community, and the hunter and the gatherers, and certain people did this, certain people did that. The community was supported, and in modern institutions, the church creates an economy of scale for a spiritual experience. You have the economies of scale, and obviously in production and factories and industrialization, and it's all an attempt to create more free time or more freedom. People don't want to be enslaved. But, the fiat money was just a horrible, horrible mistake. And there was no way to reform it. It had to be obliterated. So it's, it's just, it's hard to come up with a comparison, really. I mean, the Gutenberg's press, certainly was a huge moment, technologically speaking.
Mm.
You had the internet was a huge breakthrough. As we were saying before, the internet was originally seen as a mechanism for freedom, right? John Perry Barlow wrote Declaration of Independence for Cyberspace, but within a few years, it got co-opted, it got balkanized. It's essentially HBO now. It's all pay-per-view. It's all streaming. The average person pays like 15 subscriptions a month for content. Now, back in the 90s, when I was involved in the internet industry, you got all that for free.
Yeah.
And it was all free. But that was challenging the status quo. And so they worked for 15 to 20 years to corral that, to bring it all back in, and to make it all pay-per-view, which is the situation now. And if you try to do anything outside of that pay-per-view, they censor you. And they used to censor you based on copyright claim, but now they censor you based on their perception of you engaging in content that they deem undesirable. So it's not even a copyright claim anymore. It's just like, you're getting too much attention, so we're going to ban you, we're going to censor you, and we're going to say that you're a threat to something, right? So it's that's where they're at. So Bitcoin, thankfully, defunds the worst.
I love you too. Everybody's saying they love me. I'm wearing my crown today because I just want you to remind you that we're all royal. We're all Her Royal fucking Highnesses, His Royal fucking Highnesses, all that stuff. Because, when the IMF tries to lord itself over everybody, when it tries to say, hey, El Salvadorans, we know what's better for you, listen to us. Or we might send John Perkins down there, just tell them, we don't need to hear it from these fiat lords, that their time is over. And, the fact is, and yet Bitcoin lives on. That's going to be on your tombstone, IMF. That is what we plan on saying. And, here in the fiat world, shit is breaking down. In case you haven't gone outside, I know, in the Bitcoin world, we like to jump from citadel to citadel. If you want to go out into the fiat world, my God, I was just at CVS and it was chaos. It was total chaos. There were 5 or 6 of us customers in the store, and there was only one employee there, and chaos because, of course, the neoliberal model is that, you have these self-checkout things and something goes wrong and nobody knows how to fix it and blah, blah, blah. So there's a long line and angry people. People are getting angry and blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out on a sign as I'm walking out the door, I see that there's a shortage of workers at the place. So they had to basically have chaos inside the store, bad customer service, and they had to shut down their COVID. They have a COVID clinic there where they give you tests or they give you the vaccine or things like that. So they had to shut that down because they had no employees for that. So, in these last days of fiat, what you're seeing is this sort of breakdown. Like, nobody could be bothered to work. You've seen this at the end of every single empire. The Spanish Empire was very much like that, right? Nobody could be bothered to get out of bed for less than 10,000 nuggets of gold a day for their 10,000 grams a day, let's say, of gold. And now we have the same thing. It's like everybody's got their Biden bucks. They feel like their debts are going to be wiped out, and it's there's no energy, there's no desire, there's no hope. There's only high time preference, and consuming as much as the future as possible today.
Yeah, there it's the supply chains are breaking down, and people aren't showing up, and they're getting the Biden bucks, they're getting the money, the transfer payments, and it's breaking down. So it's cracking up, it's breaking down, and the media won't cover it. There's inflation, but they call it deflation. There's supply chain disruptions, but they call it something else.
They call it a booming economy.
They call it a booming economy, recovery. They would just refuse to use English language, in a way that would connote some meaning, right? They're just blasting this nonsense 24/7, and but they're just hardening the walls of their castles, and they're pulling up the drawbridge. So that's what neo-feudalism looks like. You have all the media people and all the billionaires live in the castle, and they support each other in the castle, and everyone else is living in essentially out there in the dirt. And the population is shifting, is getting wider and wider and wider. And the people living in the citadels aren't going to. Why would they stop this? Why would they stop the money printing if it means that they can enlarge their citadel and they can get another helicopter, they can get another jet, they can get another yacht? Why would they stop that? I mean, it's just they're not going to stop that. And the people who are being disenfranchised, they have no power. They have no political representation, and they have no capital to speak of. So they've been disenfranchised. So that's getting worse and worse.
Right. We're actually going to go deep into that. There's a study out just this past week, but nobody pays attention to the fiat world and the fiat lords anymore, right? Certainly not in the Bitcoin space, but in the virtual Jackson Hole, there was a study released from some Fed economists about this wealth and income gap. The inequality, they say, is the cause of the 0% interest rates, which is low interest rates are therefore further enrich the rich. So they're saying the rich get richer, and that's driving interest rates down because they have so much savings, way more than they could possibly spend. So when you look at Jeff Bezos, who's worth $200 billion, he can't spend any more of that, right? Like there's not enough goods for him to spend. That's why he's doing these, building rockets and stuff like that, because at least that costs like a couple $1 billion, right? You got to spend it on something. And so their vast savings, they're unable to spend all of that money they're making on all these asset gains. So, it's going into bonds and stuff like that because it's not like you put $20 billion in a bank account, right? Because you're only insured for $250,000 of it. So they have all these huge government bonds and stuff like that. But the 0% interest rates then drive the asset price ups that they own, all the real estate in New York and Manhattan and around the world, and the stock prices and stuff like that. So
we've been describing that for 10 years.
Yes.
Right? We call it interest rate apartheid.
Yeah.
We've been calling that for many years now. We've been saying that low rates drive income inequality. And we've been saying...
Yes, you did.
Right? And we've been saying that low rates don't stop the deflation. They cause the deflation. Had that conversation with Danny Blanchflower 6 or 7 years ago.
Yep.
So now the Financial Times runs an op-ed piece saying exactly what we've been saying now for 6, 7, 8 years, exactly what we've been saying. But they've known it all along, right? So this is not something they don't know. The reason they're admitting it